Well, let me first go back to this issue of should we use the word Dharma instead of religion. It's not as though, even if you say replace, whenever Gandhi says Dharma or whenever Gandhi says religion or Nehru says religion, you replace it with Dharma when they're referring to Hindu traditions, it doesn't solve the problem. When Nehru says secularism is Dharma nirapekshata, it's as difficult to make sense of as saying it's separation of politics and religion. So this is not a matter of words. It's a matter of understanding phenomena. We don't know what Dharma is. Maybe we can try and examine how Gandhi uses Dharma in Gujarati sources and say Gandhi means, when he uses Dharma, he means this, but that doesn't help us to understand what Dharma is and how it might be different from religion as an object, a thing in the world. Well, related to that is what Professor Shiv Ramakrishnan said, that Gandhi is not referring to tradition because he says, I stand by my reason and I want to reject any number of practices. Of course, that doesn't contradict that he's talking about tradition. Because it's what is typical to tradition is not that you cannot have reasons to reject practices. You don't have to accept all practices that are transmitted. You don't need reasons to accept the practices that your ancestors have transmitted. You just accept them because it's experience of generations that is transmitted. But you can have a reason to reject something. If Gandhi had a good reason to reject the kinds of practices you mentioned, that is precisely what tradition is, what it has always been. It changes. Now, you also made a point which I found interesting about Gandhi having a different notion of truth, because that is very clear from these passages also. In one passage which I find very touching, he says, look, I've been reading these texts on Orthodox Christianity, and I cannot take this seriously. I cannot believe that God is a Trinity or that Jesus is the Son of Christ and that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I'm getting my theology wrong. Now, happily. So that passage continues, and then suddenly he says, but I do regard Islam and Christianity is equally true. They're as true as Hinduism is. Now what is he saying? He's saying that Christianity is false, basically. Its doctrines are false because he cannot accept them. But Christianity is true. So in the second case, he must be using a different notion of truth. I don't think it's abstract versus concrete truth. It's more cognitive truth, in the sense truth of doctrines, versus another kind of truth. So different people have given it different names. Truth in action, some have called it pragmatic truth, but we have to figure out what that truth is. Rajaram Tolpari's question, it's very striking. You read all these passages where Gandhi keeps saying we have to unite politics and religion, and then you come to 1946 and suddenly he says, see, the state has nothing to do with religion. Religion is a personal affair. State should not interfere in religion. Statements that seem to be very close to what Nehru is saying. Of course, in the first set of statements, politics he's not referring to the state. He seems to be referring to the kind of movement for independence that he was fighting for. Certainly not referring to the state. The fact that he wants to allow the state to intervene in religion to stop communal conflict, I don't see that as a major shift. I think it's typical to Indian traditions that there's no problem for the state to put, or political authorities to put, certain limits on a tradition. Say if you know that a Hindu procession passing by a temple will cause, passing by a mosque will cause trouble, then the political authorities can ask them to take another route. And that was never a major problem. So Gandhi wants to allow the state to intervene, but apparently he wants to still retain some sphere where the state could not intervene. What he means by that sphere, I don't know. He talks about religion as a personal affair. I don't know what he means by that. I'd have to read all those excerpts again.
I think I have a question.
Yeah.
The question is to Dr. Jakob. Well, the differences of Gandhi and Nehru about religion are all very well known. But at what levels are these differences articulated? Now, for example, you said it's a matter of words. Whether religion as you know a system of a philosophical thought of the ethical moral speculations of universal speculation of a faith belief system, that's one thing, and religion as practice is another thing. And Nehru, if this is to be an exercise in the rethinking modern Indian political thought, some of the positions that we are taking are of the nature of affirming the rethinking, because the Nehruvian the critique of Nehruvian perceptions of religion or secularism are already a result of rethinking, as far as I can think of it. As for example, blaming all the Indian the weaknesses or the maladies of Indian experience in the post-independence era, blaming it on Nehru and his secular brand of secularism, his brand of socialism, and all this it's already the result of a rethinking. So when we rethink or subject Nehruvian perceptions of the religion or secularism to a re-examination, don't you think it is also necessary to be aware of the situation in which Nehru's thoughts were put into practice? Because wouldn't it be simplistic, for example, to say that it was the result of Western liberal democratic perceptions of Nehru, whereas Nehru, India has had this experience of the communal politics for more than 2 or 3 decades. The Hindu Mahasabha, the Muslim League, the partition, and then when we speak of the critique of Hindu religion or the colonial critique of Hindu religion, it's by and large the Christian missionary critique of the Hindu religion, and that was not all that pious either. So when there was this kind of a situation, and when a government was to put its policies into practice in an essentially pluralistic society, what then was the alternative before the governments of the independence India except secularism?
Well, what was the alternative in the situation just after independence? You're right in the sense there was no well-formulated alternative available. It's not as though there was some kind of political theory that provided an alternative to the secular state as a solution to communal conflict. But what I find disturbing in Nehru is the lack of curiosity, because he knows, he sees from what he knows about Indian history that Indians also solve the problems of different groups having to live together in society. So they must have developed some kind of solution, whatever that may be. But he's not curious about that experience of pluralism, that alternative. He just says, look, it was some variant of secularism, and today we have to implement the best variant, which is Western liberal secularism. And to some extent, I think that continues. You're right, we're already rethinking, but the lack of curiosity about how Indian society solve these problems is still present, both in secularist camps and in so-called communist camps. Communists try to solve it by giving one sentence, Sarva Dharma Sambhava, as though that explains this kind of pluralism. It doesn't. And the secularists keep saying, no, we need separation of religion, the state and religion. So we can perhaps not blame him for not finding an alternative, but we can blame him, I think, for a lack of curiosity.